I just don't get it, the middle-aged man said, tipping his hat back as he took a sip off of his last beer of the night. Here it is past closing time and I'm going home alone. Again. He set his glass down hard, obviously frustrated. Barkeep. Another round. Come on, Gus, the bartender said with a much put-upon sigh, it's late and I want to get home. The middle-aged man leaned over the bar and fixed the bartender with a somewhat bleary-eyed stare. Who owns this place, Billy? Me or you? You do, Gus, you do, the bartender replied, taking the middle-aged man's glass and, with another sigh, refilling it. You know this happens every Friday, Gus, it's getting to be old. I know, Billy, I know, the middle-aged man replied, taking a rather large swig off of his beer. What's wrong with me, Billy? The man asked after a moment. Why can't I seem to get me one of these fillies? The bartender shrugged, then picked up a rag and started drying glasses as he considered what to say. You want to know the truth, Gus? He asked after a moment, not really giving the older man a chance to respond. The girls that come in here, well, you're just not their type. And what kind of type is that? The middle-aged man asked, the hint of an angry edge to his voice. They're all young uns, Gus, some of them are barely more than teenagers. The bartender replied. They've all got cowboy dreams, or some bullshit like that. They're kids, Gus, they want to have fun and be crazy. They're looking for one of these wild-eyed boys that come in here with their big mouths and fast cars. They want something that just ain't you, Gus. They want me, Billy, they just don't know it. I got more money than any man in the county, and if that ain't an aphrodisiac then I don't know what is. It ain't enough, Gus, the bartender said, putting his rag down on the bar. Maybe you should go Houston, find yourself a good girl there. Houston? The middle-aged man replied with a snort. Ain't nothing there but a bunch of stuck-up society bitches. No, I want one of these here fillies. Like Gina there, the middle-aged man said, nodding towards a waitress who was wiping down tables. Gina's a married woman, Gus, you know that, the bartender replied, rolling his eyes. Yeah, but she's fine. The bartender looked over again and nodded, he had to agree there. But she's still married and I don't think you want any trouble with her husband. Okay, then, the middle-aged man said with a devilish smile, her sister then. The bartender shook his head. Gus. Lindy's half your damn age. Hell, Gina's barely more than that. So? The middle-aged man asked with another leer in Gina's general direction. The bartender sighed. Listen, Gus, you and me both know your love life's been on the crap heap since the day Marie left you. You want some free advice? The middle-aged man leaned back on his bar stool, his eyes narrowing just a little. Shoot. Go see Mother Martinez. That crazy old Mexican witch? Billy, what you been smoking? I'm serious, Gus, the bartender said, holding up his hands. I don't claim to understand how, but Mother Martinez has fixed up more than a few broken hearts around these parts. Whatever it is she's got, it's some serious stuff. What she's got, the middle-aged man replied, finishing his beer, is the same thing coming out of the south end of a northbound bovine. The middle-aged man stood and tossed a few bills on the bar. See ya tomorrow, Billy. Yeah, Gus, the bartender said, scooping up the bills, take it easy. Gus looked around the room, wondering why in the hell he'd come here. There had just been something in Billy's voice, the way it seemed to catch when he said the crazy old lady's name, that had raised Gus' curiosity. And, truth be told, he was getting a bit on the desperate side. Seeing the old witch couldn't hurt, could it? Gus had never actually met the old lady, which in itself was pretty odd when you considered that there were only about 1,000 people in the town and pretty much everyone knew everyone else. He knew of her, of course, everyone did, but he'd always kind of avoided her and most of her relatively large clan. The old woman pretty much lived up to his expectations. She was older than dust and looked like a cross between your standard run-of-the-mill Mexican Indian medicine woman and a bad reject from a gypsy movie. The room he'd been brought to was pretty much the same, Southwestern-style rugs covering almost every inch of the walls with a crystal ball and tarot cards prominently displayed on a small circular table at the center of the room. Gus tapped his feet impatiently as the old woman waited for one of her great-grandchild, to bring her the tea she'd requested. He didn't like being here and he didn't like the way the old woman stared at him like a hawk. He just about decided to make his excuses and leave when the kid reappeared with a tea service on a tray. "Would you care for some?" Mother Martinez asked him in her dry, quiet voice. "It's ginseng tea, very relaxing." "No thank you," Gus replied, holding up a hand as if to ward her off. "As you wish," Mother Martinez replied, pouring herself a cup. "Your friend is right," she stated after a moment. "You will not find what you seek, at least not as you are now. Money, Mr. Robinson, cannot buy you happiness." Gus had heard enough. It didn't even occur to him to wonder how the old woman had known about his conversation with Billy. "Thank you for your time then, ma'am," he said, picking up his hat and starting to rise. "I did not say," the old woman replied, her voice still quiet but now very commanding, "that I could not help you." Gus froze and then involuntarily relaxed back into his seat. "There are always ways," the old woman said, seemingly lost in thought, "but always at a price, at a cost." "How much?" Gus asked rather flippantly. "Not money, Mr. Robinson," the old woman said, obviously annoyed. "If you do what I suggest, it will cost you much that you hold dear, much that you think is valuable in your life now. But it will also give you much, things that you cannot now imagine. And it will give you love." Gus sighed. He had little patience for this hocus-pocus mumbo-jumbo. Why in God's name had he even come here? "What would I lose?" he asked tiredly. The old woman shrugged, her shawl falling off of one bony shoulder. "That I cannot know, nor can I know what you would gain. Only the gods can know these things. It is to them you must appeal, and you must be warned that they do things in their own way and for their own reasons. I can only say that if you are sincere you will find the love that you seek." Gus considered himself a man's man and rarely had he ever admitted to anyone that he sought anything other than the lust of a night in bed. But, like most everyone everywhere, what he really wanted in his heart of hearts was love, true love, someone to be with and someone to be with him. The old woman's words struck him deeply. It was as if she'd spoken a mere sentence but somehow opened up his life for inspection. "What do I have to do?" he asked simply. "What you have to do, Mr. Robinson, is very simple, but it may turn out to be the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life. When you return to your home, go to your bedroom and remove your clothes. Sit on the floor, clear your mind of all thoughts and worries, and pray. Pray to the gods for them to bring you love and happiness. If you are sincere, if you truly want this, they will grant your wish. I have foreseen this. No spells? No potions? No incantations? Just pray?" Gus asked incredulously. "Yes, Mr. Robinson, pray. Pray to the gods, and if you truly want it, if you are prepared to pay the cost, your wish will be granted." Gus didn't know whether to kick himself or go get a drink. He felt like a fool sitting in the nude in the middle of his bedroom. How was praying to some gods he didn't even believe in going to get him a pretty young thing on his arm? This was stupid. And yet there'd been something about Mother Martinez, something in her voice that really made him wonder. There definitely was something about that old lady, some power that went way beyond her decrepit frame. Maybe she did have some sort of access to knowledge that someone like he couldn't even begin to conceive of? Then again, maybe not. He briefly considered what she'd said about a cost. Even he had heard enough to know that some of the Indian gods were well known for their odd senses of humor. And yet, what did it matter? He had everything a man could ever want. More money than he could ever spend, respect in the community, a huge house, several profitable businesses, he had everything. Everything but love. Hell, everything but even simple sex, and he was too proud to pay for that. He never would have said it to anyone, but what did any of that matter next to real love? Nothing. For all that he had everything, his life was empty. He closed his eyes, as he'd been taught so long ago in Sunday school, and prayed to Mother Martinez's mysterious gods. His prayer was simple and sincere, "Please bring me love," and he repeated it over and over in his head until it became a kind of mantra. Repeated it until the mental syllables became meaningless and time seemed to shrink, slow. He became dizzy and he could swear that he could see images on the inside of his eyelids, indistinct faces off in the distance, but still he repeated his prayer. He prayed for minutes, for hours, perhaps even days, he couldn't even tell, until finally the faces seemed to nod and recede and he slowly let his mental prayer trail off. He opened his eyes and stood. Nothing had happened. But what had he expected? What had he really expected? He froze, his vision blurred for a second. There was someone standing across the room from him, a woman. Had it worked? Had something really happened? Who was she? There was something vaguely familiar about her. Whoever she was gorgeous and she seemed to be watching him as intently as he was watching her. Long flowing golden blonde hair, deep blue doe eyes, cute button nose, kissable full lips, athletic body, pert bust line, tiny waistline, flared hips, and long coltish legs. She was certainly a vision in her tight blouse, short pleated miniskirt, and cowboy boots. Definitely one hot filly, she looked to be maybe 30, maybe a little younger, and very much the sort who took good care of herself and was proud of her looks. It took him a moment, both of them standing there nearly frozen, to realize why she looked so familiar. She looked like a slightly older version of Gina. Same oversized blue eyes, same high-set anti-gravity breasts, she was even dressed similarly. Gina? He finally asked, breaking the silence between them. He jumped at the sound of his own voice, it sounded very odd in his ears. More importantly, that woman's lips had moved in sync with his. He shook his head, how could that be? And felt something moving against his shoulders and across his back. He reached back and grabbed his hair. Long golden blonde hair? He looked back at the woman. It was a mirror, he was looking at himself. Herself? Why hadn't he realized that before? I've lost my mind, he thought to himself, putting his hand to his lip and then quickly pulling it away. Something red on his hand, lipstick? This wasn't possible. Marie. A feminine voice called from downstairs. Are you ready yet? We're running late, damn it. Gus panicked. What was he going to do? He couldn't let anyone see him like this. Who was down there? And who the hell was Marie? He had barely a moment to think before he heard someone coming up the stairs. From the sound their shoes made on the hardwood floor, he was pretty sure it was a woman, probably the same woman who had called out before. Before he could decide if he should run, hide under the bed, or simply curl up into a ball and cry, the door opened and in walked a familiar face. "Are you ready yet?" Gina asked in an obviously annoyed tone. She looked Gus up and down once and then rolled her eyes. Walking over to a vanity Gus had never seen before in his life and knew didn't belong in his bedroom, she got a napkin and walked back to where Gus stood, rooted to the floor. "You messed up your lipstick," she said, exasperated, as she dabbed at Gus' lips. "Look, honey, I know you've been a nervous wreck lately, but you really have to be more considerate. I've got to be at work too, and I'm not the one who's marrying the boss. So could you please just hurry things a little?" Having no idea what to say and not wanting to hear his now strange voice again, Gus simply nodded. Gina looked satisfied and walked over to the bed. "I have no idea why you're even still working, sis," she said, picking a purse up off of the bed and handing it to Gus. "Can we get going now?" Gus just nodded dumbly and, not even knowing why, followed Gina out the bedroom door. At least she was someone familiar, someone he knew, at least the whole world hadn't been turned upside down. Walking downstairs in high-heeled women's-style cowboy boots was a new, and unwelcome, experience. How he managed it without breaking an ankle was a mystery to him. That was nothing compared to trying to get into Gina's little foreign car while wearing a short skirt and carrying a purse. But neither of those experiences held a candle to the confusion he felt just simply walking. Every sensation felt different, wrong. The way his breasts, bounced with every step, the unnatural, at least to him, way his hips swayed with every step, the utter liveness he felt, the odd angle of his feet in these boots. Just breathing was a new sensation. There was only one explanation: he must have lost his mind. Thankfully, he didn't have to say much of anything on the short drive. Gina's annoyance seemed to fade quickly, and she spent most of the short trip chatting about her husband and gossiping about a few of the other girls in town. Gus barely heard a word she said, he just nodded or grunted whenever she paused for breath. Gina clearly thought that he was someone named Marie, apparently someone she knew well and was close to, and there was no denying the image he'd seen in the mirror or that he now looked like Gina's slightly older sister. He thought back, wondering. Gina's mother, Bobby Jo, had been in her late 20s when Gina had been born. Certainly Gina could have had an older sister, but Gus knew, was quite sure, that Gina had been the oldest in her family. There weren't any girls in town named Marie, at least none that Gus knew of. Not, at least, since his wife had left him almost 2 years ago. Maybe he had lost his mind, that seemed the most likely answer. But there was another possibility. Maybe the old witch had tricked him. Or perhaps her perverse gods had. How was this supposed to bring him love? He recalled what Mother Martinez had said about a cost, about losing and about gaining, but this hadn't been anything he ever could have imagined and never would have accepted. He thought that perhaps some divine intervention might make him more attractive to the young girls he so coveted. Or that perhaps a young filly who was attracted to his type would be brought to him. He hadn't imagined, in any way, shape, or form, that he would become one of those young, if a bit older than he usually chased after, beautiful women he watched out on the dance floor nearly every night. And yet how could he deny the myriad new and unaccustomed sensation his body was feeding into his brain every moment? How could he deny the skirt around his waist or the feeling of differentness between his legs as he self-consciously pressed them tightly together? Or the obvious femaleness of his long thin arms, small hands and long fingers with their painted nails? Or the way Gina was chatting at him as though they'd been girlfriends their entire lives? Why did Gina seem to know who he was when he didn't even have a clue? It was just getting on to twilight when Gina pulled the car into the still mostly empty parking lot of the Chicken Wire Ranch. Gus was somehow unsurprised at their destination. Thankfully, it would still be a few hours before things started to heat up. "Look, hun," Gina said after she's turned the engine off and pulled the emergency brake, "I know you must be nervous as hell, I was. Are you sure this is such a good idea? I know this is supposed to be your last night and all, but maybe you should let me take you back home? I'm sure Gus and Billy will understand." Gus? But he was Gus. "No," he said after a moment, trying to hide the shock he felt at the sound of his own voice, "I'll be fine." He tried to give her a smile that he hoped would be reassuring. "It's your party, sis," she said with a shrug, opening the door. The inside of the Chicken Wire Ranch looked exactly as he remembered. In fact, he couldn't recall having seen anything, aside from himself and that vanity that had been in his bedroom, that was any different from what he remembered. Billy waved at them from behind the bar, and a few of the early bird regulars, almost all men, turned to see who'd walked in. There were a few wolf whistles and a couple of catcalls, to which Gina simply smiled and curtsied as Gus turned red as a beet. Billy good-naturedly chastised the regulars and then came out from behind the bar and gave them both a tight hug. Holding Gus out at arm's length, he smiled affectionately. "You ready for your big day, Marie?" Gus nodded, having no idea what Billy was talking about. "She looks like a doe caught in headlights," Billy said, turning to Gina with some minor concern on his face. "She's fine," Gina replied with a laugh, slapping him lightly on the shoulder, "it's just the jitters." That seemed to satisfy him. "Well, you two finish up the prep, we're going to have a lot of thirsty people in here in a little bit." He gave Gus a fatherly smile. "We're going to miss having you here every night, sweetheart," he said as he turned and returned to his post behind the bar. Gus was surprised to find waitressing fairly easy. Maybe he had some sort of inherent talent for it. At least it gave him something to do that took his mind off of his predicament. After the bouncer arrived and the band had started to set up, the place really picked up, and it wasn't long before it was getting pretty crowded. At first there had been a lot of orders for snacks from the kitchen, but quickly it was mostly just bringing people beers. It seemed like almost every patron in the bar, male and female, gave him a hug at one point or another and wished him luck. Why, he had no idea. He quickly got over both his astonishment at how personable people suddenly were and at the sound of his own voice. It wasn't long after the band had started playing a honky-tonk mixture of southern rock and country music at a volume that would have successfully competed with the sound of a 747 engine at takeoff that he couldn't hear himself speak anyway. He got into a rhythm, find out what people wanted, bring them their drinks, get their money and maybe a tip, and repeat. He could get through the night anyway, even if he wasn't any closer to understanding what had happened to him. He was even getting used to those damnable high-heeled boots, and the sensations constantly coming from his body were quickly becoming less odd. He definitely wasn't getting used to the way many of the girls there glared at him when he approached. And then there was way so many guys couldn't seem to look at him without seeming to leer, and how many of them looked more at the top of his low-cut blouse than his eyes when they ordered. He found that he was paying a whole lot less attention to the women in the bar and on the dance floor than to the men. For the first time in his life, he could maybe understand what it was so many of these girls seemed to find attractive about these young guys. There was something very virile about many of them, something wild and maybe even dangerous. In comparison, many of the women looked like butterflies attracted to a bright flame. He watched, with some minor envy, as one particular couple walked out to the dance floor. The guy had a confident swing in his walk, a self-assured manner, and the cutest but Gus had ever seen. That guy was definitely hot, Gus thought to himself as he turned away, having lost sight of them on the crowded dance floor. He vowed that if he got back to being his old self, he would find some way to recapture that energy, that undeniably attractive wildness, for himself. Perhaps that's what the old witch's perverse gods had intended, that he should have a chance from the other side to see what it was that he was missing, what it was that attracted these girls so to a men very different from himself. As Gus turned from the bar, a tray filled with glasses carefully balanced in one hand, he noticed that half the heads in the place were turned towards the door. He turned to see who had come in and froze with a gasp. The tray fell from his suddenly nerveless hand, the glasses and change making a horrendous noise in the sudden silence as the band finished its set. Standing just inside the doorway, a big grin on his face as he scanned the crowd, was Gus. Marie might have simply fainted right then, and there had Gina not been standing right behind her at the waitress station, and had Gina not had the presence of mind to grab her and hold her up almost physically. As it was a close thing. "Are you okay, sis?" Gina asked, concern obvious in her voice and on the faces of most of the nearby patrons. It's Gus," Marie said, obviously stunned. "Of course it is, sweetie, he always comes in about this time." Gina gently turned her sister around, looking her over quickly. "You don't look so hot, hun, let's get you back to the kitchen, okay?" "It's Gus," Marie replied, uncomprehending as she was led back to the kitchen and into a small office where her sister set her gently down in a beat-up couch. Billy and Gus crowded into the room almost before Marie had even sat down. "Is she okay?" Billy asked, worry in his voice. "Should I call the EMTs?" Gus kneeled down in front of her, taking her small hands into his large calloused ones. "Are you okay, baby?" he asked softly. "What's wrong?" She stared at him, lost in his eyes. There was concern there, worry, even fear, and something more. Love? "She could just have the vapors," Gina said. "She is under a lot of stress." There was something different about Gus, this Gus, something that Marie didn't remember when she had been him and looked in the mirror. Something about his carriage, something more confident, stronger, maybe even something wild in his eyes. He looked happy, even in his worry, more complete than she could ever remember feeling. "The vapors?" Gus demanded, glancing up at Gina. "What the Sam Hill is that supposed to mean?" She felt something just looking at him, just feeling him close to her, something she couldn't even describe to herself. "I don't know," Gina replied, obvious exasperated and worried. "It's just something I heard in a movie." Was that really love she was seeing in his eyes? Was that what she was feeling when she looked at him? Was that even possible? "She's just got wedding jitters," Billy said, watching her carefully. "She'll be fine, won't you, Marie?" he asked hopefully. "Wedding?" The word rang through her mind like the echo from a bell. "I told her she shouldn't come in tonight," Gina said, "but she wanted to see her friends and help out one last night." "Wedding? Marry yourself, it's perfect." She almost had to laugh at that thought. Could that have been the Indian god's perverse plan? She'd lost everything, even her own past. What could she gain? Love with her old self? "I don't know," Gus said. "She still seems out of it." "Call 911, Billy." "No," Marie said, suddenly coming out of it. "I'm fine, I promise. I just had a big surprise. Everything hit me at once." She shook her head, feeling for the 100th time the long blonde hair across her back. "I can't explain it." Gus looked dubious but obviously took her talking as a good sign. Gina sat down beside her and hugged her tightly. "It's okay, sis, I was pretty messed up the night before my wedding too. Marie tried to smile at that, only barely managing it. I'm fine, really. Could y'all just give me a minute? Billy nodded and quickly left. After all, he'd left the bar empty and people would be wondering what in the world was going on. Gina hesitated for a moment, but then left when she noticed that Gus was obviously waiting for her to leave. Still holding her hands tightly, he returned her smile. Are you sure you're okay, baby? He asked softly. She couldn't deny the tightening of her nipples or the warmth she felt in her belly at his gentle but strong touch, at the concern and caring in his voice. She nodded. I'm okay, promise. He stood and bent over to kiss her on the forehead. I love you, he said softly as he closed the door behind him. And he did, she knew that. Did she love him? Was that what she'd felt? Could she love herself? But she wasn't that person anymore, was she? The Indian gods that she'd prayed to had seen to that. And he wasn't the same anymore either, that much was clear. There was a fire in him, a wild-eyed southern boy look in his eyes that hadn't been there when she'd been him. Whatever exactly the old witch's gods had done, perhaps it could work out. Maybe she could be happy. Live with and love another incarnation of her old self? As perverse as the thought was, it brought a smile to her. Would that be so bad? No, it wouldn't, she decided, laughing softly as she stood. Her own laughter was the sound of chimes in her own ears as she opened the door and walked out into her new life. She didn't notice the ill-defined faces floating behind her as she closed the door. She wasn't meant to, but had she seen them she might have appreciated the somewhat self-satisfied smile on their vague lips. Marie wondered why it had taken her so long to get around to doing this. She'd meant to do it shortly after her wonderful wedding day. But she'd kept putting it off, never sure why, and now it was 6 months later when she finally called on Mother Martinez again. It is nice to see you again, Mrs. Robinson, Mother Martinez said in that old but powerful voice of hers. I see that things are going well for you. Marie smiled at that, patting her obviously pregnant belly. Yes, they are. I wanted to thank you for coming to my wedding, Mother. It was my pleasure, the old woman said with a wide smile. Such a beautiful day, and such a beautiful bride, thank you for the invitation. Marie almost laughed at that. Her wedding had been huge, one of the biggest events in as long as anyone could remember. If there was anyone who hadn't been invited, she couldn't think of who it was. And I also wanted to thank you for making it all possible, Marie said, her thoughts turning to more serious things. Mother Martinez seemed speechless. Marie was sure she was the first one to have seen that in a very, very long time. I am sorry, child, the older woman said after a moment, but I do not know what you mean. Marie's eyes widened in surprise. Everyone seemed to remember things one way, that she'd been born in town, the oldest daughter of Bobby Joe Wright, and grown up and eventually met Gus and fallen in love, but Marie still knew that things had happened a bit differently, and she had felt certain that the old woman, if anyone could, would remember things the way she did. You don't remember me coming to you? Coming to you when I was someone else? How you told me to pray. Prayer is always good advice, the old woman said, but, no, I'm afraid I do not. There was silence between them and the last tiny vestiges of Marie's old life fell away from her. It doesn't matter, I suppose, Marie said, I just wanted to thank you. The old woman smiled. You are welcome, child. And always welcome in my house and welcome to whatever small help I might be able to provide. Believe me, Mother, you have already been more help to me than I could ever tell you, Marie said with a laugh. The gods spoke to me last night, the old woman said after a moment's hesitation. They spoke to me of things I do not understand. They told me that you would be coming to see me today and that you would speak of strange things that I would not remember or understand. Marie listened and nodded. They gave me a message for you, one I also do not understand. What did they say? Marie asked gently. Mother Martinez seemed surprised by Marie's lack of disbelief or surprise. She was obviously not used to that from one so young. They said, she said softly, her eyes lost in thought, to love your husband with all your heart and to raise your children to be good. That would be thanks enough. I will, Marie replied, tears in her eyes. Taking the old woman's frail hands into her younger ones, she tried to smile through the tears. Tell them that I promise that I will. Mother Martinez nodded, reaching out to touch the young woman's beautiful face. The ways of the gods were ever mysterious. She would pass on the message and pray for the young woman's happiness and the health of the baby inside her.